So, next up is one of our members from Prostate Cancer Canada Network Calgary, Colin Jackson. Colin's been with our organization about 4 years now or so, and he describes himself as a little bit different. And so Colin's in his 80s, and he's very physically active, but he's been physically active his entire life. And I think he's going to speak to that here. Everyone give Colin a warm welcome.
Might have made me fall over. When I was asked to say something, I always like to do a lot of preparation. So I spent 3 days writing up different things, threw them all out, and this morning I changed them. And then I listened to all these wonderful speakers tonight, and I thought, heck, I'll throw this away too, except for a few bits. I won't talk about my cancer first, or cancers. I collect them. But I'd like to just talk a bit about my early life, which goes back, geez, that light's bright, goes back quite a way. Can I talk? That's better. Yeah. I was born in Australia. My mother was of a family of 13 children, and she was the oldest, so she was their mother. My father had a brother, and the brother died of pneumonia. The rest of the family had no sign of cancer, with the exception of my mother's youngest brother, who came to Canada in World War II and did a pilot's course down at Nanton or somewhere down there. Fell in love with a Mormon girl, and he died of testicular cancer, and it could have been because he had 8 kids. Overworking, you know. We touched on that, didn't we? I'm a little bit of a Forrest Gump, a little crazy because I had 3 pretty good concussions when I was a kid. They never affected me in the slightest. You know, but anyway. I was 9-year-old when World War II started, and Australia was quite a bit different to here. They had much more Japanese activity than what North America had. We had only a population of 5 million people, so all the fathers and everybody moved. My father was too old at the time. He still ended up in the Air Force. That left me and my mother and my sister, who was 3 years older than me, and that made me a bit of a renegade because I never did like to do what anybody told me. And so I joined the Scouts 3 years earlier than I was legally able to because I wasn't old enough. And that, I think, was one of the things that set me on a track that I've followed ever since. From there I went on to, you call it backpacking here, we call it bushwalking. And in Australia, is anybody, if I can see through this light, is anybody here from Australia or New Zealand? So anybody else been there? Good. If you've been, did you go to the Blue Mountains or any of the mountains in Australia? Stop that. Who's doing that? God, I can't see people. That's down. Come on. Turn it off. That's it. I can see in the dark. You stop too. Anybody who's been there will know that it's different here to Canada, where this was a glacial era and we had roads going through the valleys. In Australia, they couldn't find a way over the Blue Mountains for 13 years because they were plateau and everything goes over. What? Who's doing that crap? Stop it. Everything goes over the top. And I'll just pass a photo around so you can see what I mean. When we went hiking or backpacking, we had to walk down these huge ravines first and then come up. So it meant you did a lot more energy. I wasn't blessed with a good, big, strong body. I was a real pipsqueak. So was my father. His friends used to call him Chook. And I'll just pass a picture around here. You'll see this is me at 15, and all you've got to do is look for the smallest guy there, and that was me. If anybody wants to pass it around, see. I really got into this backpacking, and my mother occasionally would rent a house at Blackheath, which was in the mountains, and we weren't very rich, but she was pretty good at saving up, and so a couple of times we would go by tour car down to a place called Jenolan Caves, and I just fell in love with the caves, and I was just the right size for it. I was never muscular, I was never big, I could fit through holes that other people couldn't fit through. So in later life I joined the Sydney University Speleological Society. Do you know what speleos are? Anybody? Cave explorers. And it was pretty good because I could go places that other people couldn't go, hence my size. Until I was in my 40s, I only weighed 110 pounds, so I wasn't very big at all. After I had cancer, I went up to 175, and I've got it back down again now. But I'll just show you a picture here of the things that I was able to do, which I'll now pass around as well. I could fit through holes like that other people couldn't fit through. Now, particularly Carol, was it? Our last speaker? Lorraine, sorry. She touched on some things that the other speakers didn't touch on, and I want to touch on those as well. And they're things like attitude, mental and physical, acceptance, and one particular thing that the ladies will love. You notice the ladies live longer than the men here in Canada? And hi. And the reason is that ladies always go and see the doctor. When they have anything that they're concerned about, they go to the doctor. And they have regular pap smears and regular breast tests and things like that. And I've talked to men about cancer since I've had some myself, and I say to them, why don't you go and have a colonoscopy? Why don't you have a PSA test? Oh, no way, we don't want to know. And any men like that here? And when they do get their cancer, they're just devastated. But if you lead a life like I did, where I've faced death several times, and I'll give you a couple of examples of that, and it gets to the stage that you don't really care. And it doesn't frighten you anymore. The first time I saw a dead body was when I was 9-year-old. The war just started, and the gasoline was rationed in Australia, and so was food and everything else. And the trucks delivering goods used to have charcoal burners on the front, and they burnt coal by a slow combustion process that let off gas and mixed with gasoline, and they could get a little bit further on their ration of gas. And down on the corner below the house we lived in, there was a coal truck and a Hoadley's chocolate truck crashed. And everybody ran down to pick up coal with their buckets, and I ran down to pick up chocolates. And while I was there, I saw my first 2 dead bodies. One was a man crushed underneath the charcoal burner, which was very heavy and probably burnt to death as well. And the other one, the side of it, like a cube van that we have here, the metal had come off and it took his skull right off. And it was just hanging by a bit of skin, and a policeman walked over and picked up his hair and picked up the skull and pulled him out by the arms. And I went home and I couldn't sleep that night. I saw this for days. But after that, it didn't really scare me anymore. And so I got involved as I went along in the St John's Ambulance. I was an instructor in that. Here in the Ski Patrol, I was a senior examiner. I joined the Heart Foundation, teaching CPR, even to doctors too. And currently I run a group of 125 ladies at the Mount Pleasant Tennis Club. And they're all senior, not ladies, sorry, 125 seniors, they're 60 and older. And that helps to keep me fit as well. Today I just played 4 hours of tennis, that's why I'm here with this gear on. And I just haven't stopped as a kid. When I'd go, as I grew and I went backpacking, I would walk 40 to 50 miles on a weekend with a friend of mine. One Christmas, we used to get 8 weeks of holiday over there from school because it was Christmas and summertime. We went down to the main range in the Kosciuszko National Park, and Don Roy and myself, he died about 20 years ago from colon cancer, and we walked 75 miles down the range at about 6,000 feet, most of it, dropping down 1,000 feet every night to a hut into Corryong in Victoria, hitchhiked back to Sydney, and he went back to work, and I picked up another friend and hitchhiked to Queensland and walked another 65 miles through the Lamington Plateau. And you thought nothing about it. So when you get to doing regular exercise here that's all controlled and everything, you don't have to do that. Just do exercise. I don't expect anybody to get up tomorrow and walk 65 miles, but take it easy and do it within your capacity. My first wife was a bad diabetic, and in 1966 they gave her 4 years to live, and she died just before midnight in 1969. Now I went and studied up on diabetes. I looked after her. I gave her injection every day, bought her out of hypoglycemic attacks and things like that. And when she died, I didn't realise till afterwards that I hadn't been exercising. And I felt terrible. So it took me a long time to get physically fit again. The last 3 months, I had to have a little dog that died, a beautiful dog, and I was in love with it. And I used to walk on Nose Hill Park every day. There's about a 250-foot climb. I'd walk up there, and we'd walk for 2 or 3 hours. And she got some complaint from the herbal treatment that the city's been spraying on bushes, and dogs are dying around there like mad because of it. It was just a terrible death for her. We had to put her down in the end. I've had friends that had the same dog, and I saw some coyotes that were dragging themselves along the ground the same way. But that really upset me. In the last month, I haven't exercised like I should, and so she died last week, and I've been back into it again. By way of cancer, in 1997, I took my new wife and my mother-in-law to Australia for a trip, and went up into the Daintree rainforest in Queensland looking for crocodiles and pythons, and I got eaten by mosquitoes. In fact, there were so many that I had to put 2 rocks in my pockets so they wouldn't take me away, And I came back and I had a fever. I went to the wrong doctor that turned out to be the right doctor, George Sparks, and he put me through a barricade of tests. And barricade, that's wrong, isn't it? Put me through a barrier of tests, and there was a bit of blood in a stool, sent me to an oncologist, and he rang up a few days later and said, you need to come and have a colonoscopy, which I did. And I had never had an operation in my life except for tonsillectomy. And he sedated me at Peterloch Hospital and took out 12 polyps. And he said it'd be about 20 minutes I'd be sedated. At 45 minutes I came out of the sedation and watched him take the last 2 out on the television. And I tell you, one of them, you wouldn't eat it. It looked horrible. You wouldn't want to cook it. And the other one, the last one, was a bit more normal. The one was cancerous, one was precancerous. So then they rang up and said, we recommend that you have an operation and take out a little bit of your sigmoid colon and where the polyps came from, and we'll see whether they got through into the colon shell and the lymph glands. So they took out 20 centimetres of colon and 8 lymph glands, and it turned out that they hadn't travelled too far. But that was my first op, and I tell you it was interesting because instead of getting worried about it, when they said you got cancer, it never bothered me. I thought, hell, I'll tell you about how I was nearly killed later, but I thought, heck, I've had so many chances of dying that another one won't make any difference. So I went down and wheeled down to the operating room, and I was waving to everybody, and my wife was crying like mad in the hallway, and 4 hours later I wasn't waving so well. But they put me on a morphine drip, and I had plastic thingos on the leg that pumped up every few seconds to stop blood clots. They came and said, well, give yourself a shot of morphine, push the button there, and then we'll go for a walk. Well, I pushed the button, and my legs dangled down on the floor. It hurt like hell, but we walked, and then I wouldn't stop walking. I just kept walking, and they had to chase me to put me to bed because the walking was much better than lying there. And the thing was that the morphine made me itch. I could have torn those things off my legs. It was just absolutely terrible. So the nurse said, well, I'll get the doctor and we'll put you on Demerol. Well, I looked out the window from the room I was in and I could see the Future Shop sign outside. And I looked at the Future Shop sign and then had a shot of this Demerol. And the sign came in through the window and started to chase me around the room, and I was hallucinating. So I said, to hell with this. And I refused to press any buttons after that. And I was better for it. And I found out afterwards more people die from the anaesthetic and the treatment than what they die from the operation. Anyhow, I got over that. 3 weeks later I was in China working, and I wasn't supposed to go, but I did. It didn't worry me. And I then I'd severed my anterior cruciate in this leg, and I went to Dr. Hurd in Banff, and he put a new anterior cruciate in. He didn't take one of mine because I'm not muscular, so he put a girl's that didn't want it anymore, her patella ligament in. It was actually bigger than my anterior cruciate, and I made up my mind that, hey, I'm not even going to have anaesthetic. So the anaesthesiologist gave me a lumbar tap, which hurts like hell, but they wanted to put me under, and I argued with him for nearly an hour, and Dr. Hurd came in and said, for God's sake, make your mind up, you know. And I laid and watched the whole operation, and it was fun. And I tell you, instead of being the guy in the bed near me was an hour and a half in recovery, I was out in just over 30 minutes and had no trouble at all. So then in 2001, Dr. Sparks again and his digital examination found some hard spots and recommended I go to an oncologist, which was Dr. Sidney Bass, and he carried out a colonoscopy and took out 12 polyps. And as I said, he came back and said one of them was cancerous, one was precancerous. Oh, sorry, I told you about that. Come back again. Dr. Bass sent me to an oncologist, urologist, and we decided to have biopsies. I had 10 biopsies and 5 showed cancer, and so then we set up an appointment to have a radical prostatectomy. And again, I argued about anaesthetic because those lumbar taps are darn good things, you know. You don't feel anything. Your legs are useless. But they still insist on anaesthetic. But I still never, ever touched any analgesic again after that. And I was better for it. In 3 years ago, be October, I had a relapse of the prostate cancer because the surgeon had left, of these 5 locations, he'd left some cancer behind. I should have had radiation straight after the operation, but he didn't, and I didn't discover that until I got a copy of the surgical report in more recent time. And so they sent me for radiation, and I had 6,200 centigrays, the remote arm radiation unit, external beam radiation unit that I had. They don't use nuclear isotopes much now, Tom Baker. They've got 1 unit left. They've got 10 units. They've got 1 unit left that has a radioactive isotope. The rest are creating radiation by electronics, and it's more accurate. The whole thing is very, very technical. They take you in and do a scan on you and measure exactly where it is. I was told not to put on weight, not to lose weight, because the distance between the unit and the colon, the stomach, this has to be right. They tattoo you on the hips and they line you up, and they've got to be within 2 millimetres, so everything's very accurate. And over a bit over a month, I had 6,200 centigrays of radiation, and that wasn't a problem. You feel nothing. And but what had happened, because I had the colon surgery, the scar tissue there was radiated, and I ended up with a form of colitis. My doctors gave it another name, radiation colitis or something like that. And that has caused a lot of bleeding because it's ulcerated. And I'm gradually getting over that. I take a little carton of Dan Active every day, and I take a tablespoon of what's the other pink stuff? Orange stuff. Metamucil. I take that every day, and so you're getting old, and it's getting better. But what happened was I had the colonoscopy again straight after the radiation, and it was on just day before Christmas Eve, and by Boxing Day I was bleeding like mad, and I didn't realise that I'd lost so much fluid, and so I became dehydrated, and I slept downstairs so I wouldn't keep my wife awake getting up during the night, and I fell on the floor. I collapsed into the cupboard. I sat on the toilet and fell off the toilet, and I managed to get myself to my doctor just before Christmas, and he gave me some pills. I forget what he said the problem was, but he said it's the worst case I've seen that the patient has still lived. I said, thanks. and I'm still getting over that. Now, why I think the way I do is because I had a lot of things in my younger life that could have killed me, and I'll give you some examples. I had a little colour camera, my first one I ever bought, and I was in the Blue Mountains, and I was looking to take photographs of waterfalls, which I can send around as well. They're not very good pictures. My printer was playing up. But there's one there coming down a granite face. That's 1,200 feet high. It doesn't look it. When you take a photo of the waterfall, if you take it near the bottom, it shortens it. So on the other one, I climbed up a cliff face to get a shot where I'm halfway up, and you get a better feeling of the height. And I just got up, it was about 35, 40 feet off the ground, and I'm hanging onto a bit of rock and just about to climb, and pulled my head over the top, and there's only my shoulders and head over there. And I looked straight into the eyes of about a 7-foot giant brown snake. I tell you, panic set in. Set in with the snake too. It roared up, opened its mouth, I could see its fangs and its little thing coming out, and it dived under the rocks, and I let go of the cliff, and then I grabbed a rock and it spun me around, and if you want to get your heart rate up, look a snake in the face at that distance, I can tell you. When I went fishing, I went up in Fraser Island. Anybody been in Fraser Island? It's a 400 square mile, the world's largest sandy island, and it's not a desert. It's got beautiful freshwater lakes on it, and it's covered with jungle, and it's the last remaining herd or pack of natural dingoes in Australia. The rest of all interbred with other animals, and there's some 2,000-year-old trees there and things like that. But this was in 1966, just after the war, and we had 810 scouts, and we were supposed to stay there for a week, and on the second day there, one guy came down with polio. We had a doctor with us, and so the government decided to quarantine us. Here was a little village sort of thing, so they quarantined us for 3 weeks. We had food for a week. They forgot to send the food. So 4 of us went and walked up the beach. There's a 75-mile long beach, and there's a wreck of a ship up there, and we walked up to that. It was about 30 miles, and we got some oysters off it. We lived on ferns, and they gave me to carry a 1/4 pound of cheese. That's all we had for a week, and we decided not to eat it. There were some people fishing there, and they had an onion, and they had an eel on the table, and some fish, and about half a loaf of brown bread that was mouldy down the centre, and half a tin of treacle. And we waited there waiting. When are they going to leave? When are they going to leave? And they left, and we skinned the eel and cooked it, cut the bread up, put the treacle on it and some onion, and that was our dinner. The next morning it was my turn to fish and catch breakfast, and I'd fished a lot in the ocean, and I had a one of those wooden reels that you swing around and it's tapered and you can throw the line out. And the further you get out and throw the line, the bigger the fish you catch up there. There's fish everywhere. So I got out up to about here in the waves, and I'm backing off, and one of the other scouts yelled out, "Get out of the ocean!" And here's this fin coming in, like that. It was a white point shark from the reef. Now, white pointers don't necessarily kill people, they just eat bits of them. And I tell you, I backed onto that beach real quick, and I threw the reel down. I had a sheath knife on the side here. I pulled it out and I ran down because the shark had skidded right up on the beach. It was that hungry. And I thought, I'll kill it. But the wave came in and it turned around and went out again. Again, get your heart rate up. It does it good. Other than that, I used to play tennis, competition tennis in Australia in the summer. I'd play on Saturdays and Sundays. We didn't bushwalk in the summer because it was too hot, except occasionally I'd walk by myself 30 miles down the coast and swim on the beaches on the way. And on Wednesday nights, I was a member of the Western Suburbs Athletic Club, and I had a desire to run marathon. And I got up there, and every week I'd increase it. And I got to 15 miles on a Wednesday night before they'd shut down. And I did eventually run 2 marathons. Never any good, but I did win some events in the 440 and the 880 and the mile. So all my life I've been extremely active, and I'm still active. When I got over the cancer bits and my wife dying and things like that, it took a while to get back into it. As somebody said, you get this muscle deterioration, and it takes a long time to pick it up. But I can recommend to you that you use this as well as fitness, because get an attitude that you can beat cancer, because you can. So many people, I'm sure they're all here, that are beating cancer at the moment. You might, well, we say it's better to die with cancer than from it. Just think about that for a second. And if you've got the right attitude and you do all these other things, you can extend your life usually in about 5-year intervals. You know, I'm into 15 years intervals now. I've got a friend that's from our group, Fred McHenry, who has been 18 years fighting prostate cancer, and he's really in his last stages. I went to visit him just a couple of days ago. His skin is all broken out and blotchy. He broke his leg. He's not in much pain, but he said to me, he said, "I'm ready to go now. I'll take the treatment they're giving now, but I'm not going to start any new ones." So we can, unfortunately, Fred was one of our main warriors, wasn't he? Unfortunately, his time is limited, and so is mine. Thank you.